Erin's fantastic. So come on up.
Oh, they have control from over there. Hi.
Hi.
Is it working? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Closer.
Closer. Oh, there it is. It's picking up. I also have the world's softest voice. So you might lose me at some point and just remind me that no one can hear me because I don't notice it. So hi, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really happy to be here to talk with you all in person as well as online. I'm Erin Baurle, as Ben mentioned, and him and I are kind of two sides of the same coin, where I work on the solid tumor side of things here. And I'm here to talk to you today about mental health and cancer, both on the caregiver side as well as the patient experience during cancer care and survivorship. We know that if you aren't in good mental health or if we're struggling with rumination or stress, it's going to impact how you sleep. And just as a plug to what Ben talked about, it's highly effective to do the sleep compression. You do feel pretty bad for a week or two. We run a class, and we saw the first week everyone was excited. Week 2, they came back, and they were pretty mad at us. They were not sleeping very well. But by weeks 3 and 4, they were thrilled. They had really good outcomes and results. So it does work. Just kind of brace yourself and your loved ones that you'll be a little grumpy for a while. Is it this button? Maybe it's this one. This one? Oh, okay. Great. So today we'll focus a lot on mental health. So we'll talk about what mental health looks like, again, both for patient and caregiver. And then I'm calling this, in general, good mental health practices. So we'll talk about relaxation techniques, cognitive behavioral therapy, not just for insomnia, but the cognitive piece of what Ben talked about. We'll also go through radical acceptance and commitment therapy, mindfulness, the concept of self-compassion, which is a growing and newer field. And then we'll teach you how to respond versus react to stress, which is going to help you with your sleep. I'm going to give you many, many tools today. Think of them as tools for your toolbox. Some of them I'm going to say over and over again. Some Ben has already talked about. It's kind of like marketing. If we mention it 6 times, maybe it will stick. And then I also want you to think about the fact that sometimes these tools will work really well, or there'll be one situation it works really well in. Like maybe if you have an upcoming scan or blood tests and you're nervous about what the results might be, one of these interventions could help with that, whereas a different one's going to be effective in a different part of your life. So we really just want to expand what coping tools you have available to you. I used the term survivorship in the title of my talk, and so I just wanted to come to the same page or understanding of survivorship. And so this is the nationally accepted definition that anyone from the time of diagnosis is defined as a cancer survivor. So that has no bearing on the outcome, whether you currently have active disease. And so if I mention the word survivor throughout the rest of my talk, I just wanted to explain who it is I'm talking about. So mental health and cancer is a relatively new field, coming out in the 70s. So historically, the only tool we had against cancer itself was surgery, which is why a lot of accreditation for cancer centers are actually from the College of Surgeons. As we expanded our cancer treatment options, people lived longer. And then starting in the late 1970s, we started to think for the first time, maybe we should see how they're doing emotionally. Now that they're living longer with cancer, there certainly has got to be an impact on them and their loved ones. And so the field of psychosocial oncology, where Ben and I practice, was born. And it came out of Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. My colleagues in cancer care, like Dr. Liu, are getting very, very good at treating cancer, and people continue to live longer lives, even with metastatic or advanced cancer. And so my field, in turn, is growing. We're getting better at understanding how people feel emotionally at different time points from diagnosis. I like to think of mental health and cancer as a bit on a continuum, and maybe some of you will relate to some of this. When we're newly diagnosed, we tend to see very high levels of distress. Things are very chaotic. We know something's wrong, but we don't know how wrong or what the plan is going to be for it. Usually once we determine what the treatment plan is, and if we're doing, whether it's surgery first or chemo, usually around like the second cycle of chemo or a few weeks into the treatment plan, I tend to see people's levels of distress lessen, and they're really focused on physically getting through their cancer care. It's also during this time that caregiver distress is at its highest. The caregiver is taking on the roles and responsibilities of the person who's going through active cancer treatment. And then as we transition to the end of that treatment for someone who's got curative intent, or we're hoping to get a period without disease, the caregiver's levels of distress tend to ease as we move into periods of time without treatment. And then often for the first time, the person who is diagnosed with cancer is experiencing distress or coming to terms with what it is that just happened to them. For individuals that have chronic cancer or long-term cancer, the distress looks a little bit different. I tend to see it peak around treatment transitions, if there's ever progression or changes. And then obviously roles look different long-term. A couple things I wanted to point out on this slide is that mental health concerns are very common in the cancer population in general. So I'm here talking in broad strokes, as there's not a ton yet on mental health and neuroendocrine tumors. Changes in relationships and identity are common, and then on the other side you can see just rates of how frequently people will be diagnosed with formal psychiatric conditions. Both Ben and I, providing care in psychosocial oncology, focus less on formal mental health diagnoses, and we often see people that don't meet criteria for mental health diagnosis but are really suffering psychologically as a result of cancer diagnosis, treatment, and changes in identity. I found a recent study on neuroendocrine tumors in particular and mental health, well, actually quality of life. This is as close as I could get. And I expect if we do this talk again in 5 or 10 years, we'll have more data as my colleagues in research look into this. But this study came out in 2022, and they looked at about 150 patients. Median age was 54, and it talks about the impact on different level or different areas of life and how their life has changed since a neuroendocrine tumor diagnosis. And so you can see moderate to significant impact on energy, which is going to impact every aspect of your life, and certainly something we're concerned about with sleep. Ability to take care of family, emotional health, and 66% of folks was moderately to significantly impacted negatively. Financial strain, over a quarter of individuals had to stop working since their diagnosis. And so we can see that life looks very different after a cancer diagnosis, particularly neuroendocrine. Again, I wanted to highlight impact on caregivers. Distress is very high at all points, but particularly during those active treatment times when they're the point person communicating with their support networks, picking up responsibilities around the house, and navigating a complex medical system. Caregivers for cancer tend to have significant rates of anxiety and depression, and females are more likely to have adverse mental health while caregiving for a cancer diagnosis. Unfortunately, there's consistent research that caregivers neglect their own health, and we'll see them 5 or 10 years after their partner or loved one was diagnosed, more likely to have chronic health conditions of their own. And we think this is because they're avoiding preventative care while they're so busy in the caregiver role, and or the additional stress of caregiving sets them up to be more likely for chronic conditions down the road. And there was a new study that came out that I hadn't been aware of, particular for cancer in general and insomnia. And it actually found that if the patient's not sleeping well, there's a very, very high correlation that the caregiver themselves is also not sleeping well. And the same effect was found in the opposite direction. So if the caregiver is stressed, if they're having troubles with insomnia, it's also very likely that that is negatively impacting the patient. So whichever role you are here in today, I just wanted to say that what we're teaching you today is going to have a big impact, and it's really important to address your sleep. So now we're going to switch gears and talk for the majority of the time about good mental health practices. So the healthier mind that we can have, the better we can respond to stress, the better success you're going to have at transitioning into sleep and getting deep, restful sleep. So basic relaxation techniques for sleep. I don't know if any of you have kids, but it seems like a big push lately in schools when they do the social emotional teaching is teaching them how to calm themselves down. And so this triangle breathing that I've shown this diagram for is one of my favorite. A lot of times kids will use star breathing, but it's very simple and we can all do it right now. And so what I like to do is just use my first finger and put it down either on the table or on my hand. And on one side, we're gonna breathe in for the count of 3, We're going to hold for the count of 3 and then breathe out for the count of 3. And we'll do that one more time. So just breathe in, hold, and out. It takes a few times for that to work, but that's something you can do in almost literally any situation. It's hard for me to think of somewhere where that wouldn't work. And is a really good thing to do if we're noticing that we're looping at night before bed. This is a really quick and easy way that we can shift our focus and shift our thought, which is a big thing we'll talk about today. The next slide goes into detail on diaphragmatic breathing, which I personally have always found a little bit hard to explain, and I like the images there better, so we'll go over that. Worry time is another intervention that's been around for decades, and the concept of this is before you go to bed at night is often when that to-do list pops up and we start thinking about all the things we need to do the next day or the thing you said to someone that you're embarrassed about. And when that comes up, we want to redirect ourselves to say, hey, I've got time on the schedule tomorrow. My worry time is 11:50 to noon, right before lunch, and I'm going to write about that then. So set a timer on your phone for some time during the day. We don't want to do this right before bed. I like to use the notes feature on my phone. You can jot things down there. If you prefer pen and paper, you can do that. You don't need to keep what your worries are. We just want to get them out of your head. And then the thing that really works about that is when the concern pops up at other times during the day, we don't get stuck on it because we have a scheduled time to go back to it. And we actually find that worry decreases when we do this. We spend less time in worry throughout our day when we have this slot of time to take care of it. Savoring taps a lot into mindfulness. So again, this is one of those we'll hear multiple different times from different angles today. Savoring, you probably remember Oprah had us all gratitude journaling a couple years ago, and this is similar to that concept, where instead of focusing on gratitude, we're thinking about what's something that went really well today, what's something I really enjoyed. Maybe it was a latte, your walk over lunch, maybe it was a new hand lotion that smelled really good, or getting to push your kids on a swing. But really trying to think of something that went really well and going through all the details and using the 5 senses to come into contact with that. And we'll do some visual imagery later. That app, the CBTI Coach app that Ben mentioned, has a couple guided meditations. One is mountains. I think there's a couple on the beach. And so if you're having a hard time imagining a beautiful or peaceful place for yourself, use the free app, and then that'll help you kind of create more language or familiarity with using imagery. So here's the slide on diaphragmatic breathing. So if we could all sit comfortably, you place one hand on your upper chest and the other just below your rib cage. And then it's very hard for me to talk and speak, so mine's going to sound a little funky. But we're going to breathe in slowly through your nose so your stomach moves out against your hand, and the hand on your chest will remain still. And then as you tighten your stomach muscles, you'll let them fall inward, and you'll exhale through pursed lips. And the hand on the chest must remain as still as possible. Sometimes it feels really funky at first because we're not used to doing this. But you'll notice after a couple breaths, and again, this is something that you can do, not when you're driving, but most other situations. You're sitting in a waiting room, we're sitting here today, we can practice that. And I like how this diagram shows where the diaphragm is and what that looks like. And again, I think you guys will have access to that for future reference. Refocusing, again, we'll hit this from a couple different angles, but we want to reconnect to the present moment. If we think, or if we catch ourselves thinking about something that might happen in the future or that has already happened in the past, I want you to bring your awareness back here to the present moment. Easiest way I find to do that, besides using the breath techniques of triangle breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, is to go through your 5 senses. So what's one thing you can touch? What's one thing you hear? What's one thing you smell? What's one thing you taste right now in the present moment, whether you're laying in your little nest that Ben talked about, or you're in, again, a waiting room or in a car, really focusing back to where we are. And this is going to help pull us out of that tug of war with challenging thoughts or uncomfortable emotional experiences. And when we're less stressed, we're more likely to transition into sleep. We'll talk about this, but I'll mention it now. We want to practice the relaxation response. Just like if you want to build bicep muscles, you're going to need to do a lot of bicep curls and push-ups and what other exercises tap into that. So that you can get stronger at that. And we need to practice relaxation. We can't just use the 5 senses technique for the first time when we're 10 out of 10 stressed or panicked. It's not going to work as well as if we haven't tapped into that muscle before. So shifting gears a little bit, this is where we start to talk about cognitive behavioral therapy. So if we change our thoughts or change our relationship to our thoughts, and those are two different schools of thought, we can also improve our psychological well-being or reduce our emotional distress. So how we think impacts our sleep. So here is a graph on how sleep, unhelpful behavior, thoughts, and feelings are going to impact our sleep overall. And what I will say is that the top 3 things on this cycle, we have a lot of control over. So we can help our sleep environment. Ben talked a bit about sleep hygiene. I'm sure Seth is going to talk about that as well. We can improve our behavior. So as he said, sleep compression, trying to avoid spending a lot of time in bed when we're not sleeping, staring at the clock, watching TV in bed, all of those are unhelpful. As well as unhelpful thinking, which is what we'll talk about for the next several slides, is if we have challenging thoughts or we're setting ourselves up psychologically, essentially for failure, it's going to make all the rest of it harder. What we don't have control over, and if we did, Ben and I probably would not have a job, is we can't control our feelings. Our feelings are going to happen. They're like the weather. They come and they go. But if we modulate our thinking and our behaviors, we tend to have less intense emotional experiences and get less stuck in our feelings. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is blurry, so you don't need to get your eyes checked. But this is a screenshot that I took on different types of unhelpful thinking. So again, from cognitive behavioral therapy, the cognitive part focuses a lot on what we think and how we think. And so these are unhelpful thinking styles, previously called automatic negative thoughts. Does anyone recognize themselves in any of these thinking patterns? Yeah. All right. Anyone feel comfortable sharing which topic they tend to fall into? Yeah.
I'm a future tripper.
Yeah? Good.
I'm always trying to predict the future.
Yeah. Good example, trying to predict the future. Anyone else? Yeah.
When I get any kind of a diagnosis, I tend to be an overthinker
Mm-hmm.
and try to figure it out and fix it. And you can have obsessive.
Yeah.
And then you start that mental rumination on it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So she said that when she gets a diagnosis or if there's a change in medical news, she's an overthinker and tends to ruminate and kind of gets stuck there. So we all do these. There's nothing bad with having these thinking patterns. It starts to become unhelpful if we use them all the time or overdevelop them. And what we'll learn next is how to slightly change them or adjust the way that we're thinking and call ourselves out when we fall into these patterns. Here's another poster I borrowed from the internet. On the one side are automatic negative thoughts, and then I really like the way they've laid out these questions. So this starts to introduce the concept of challenging our negative, or I like to call them unhelpful thoughts. So if you're having the thought, this is never going to get better, what's a more helpful thought? Is there another possibility? Might this be something that could get better? This one is hard. It works in some situations really well. It tends to not work well in the cancer field, I will be honest, is what's the worst that could really happen. That's a hard one because there really can be some challenging things that happen, and our mortality comes up a lot in cancer, of course. But thinking also about the best possible outcome, you've probably seen that thing online about, if I spend all this time thinking about the worst possible outcome, I need to spend at least 5 minutes thinking about the best possible outcome. And then something we'll talk a lot about here is one simple way to shift your thoughts away from the unhelpful thinking is to think, what would my sister say to me, or what would my friend say to me in this situation if they were in the same spot? They probably wouldn't be talking to themselves or to me like I'm talking to myself. This is really hard to read. The important thing is really just what we see at the top. So this is from Ben, and this is a traditional challenging thought log that he used with someone a few years ago. And so this helps us recognize our automatic thoughts. So in this situation, the person is having the thought, but I'm going to sleep badly tonight, I'm having my in-laws over for lunch tomorrow, it's going to be a disaster because I'm not going to sleep well, and they're really starting to panic. And they are recognizing that their feeling is they're really nervous, and it's probably a 90, I like to use a 10-point scale, so it's like a 9 out of 10. So they're pretty amped up. Sleep is obviously really far away if they're having 9 out of 10 feelings of anxiety and thinking that tomorrow is going to be a disaster. So then they use these questions on the bottom, which is similar to that last slide, where they have these ways to challenge negative thoughts. This is just a little more clinical and less pretty way to do the same thing, is asking, is there an alternative explanation? Well, I guess, I could be anxious because I really want to impress my in-laws and their appraisal of me is really important. Thinking about the worst thing that could happen, the best thing that could happen, is there evidence for this? And then the one that I really like is, how important is this going to be when I'm 80? And you could do, how important is this going to be in 6 months or in a year? It doesn't need to be a certain age. And then again, highlighting on number 8, if a good friend was in this situation, what might I tell them? And she said to relax or to chill out. And then as you can see, the outcome after she did this thought exercise was her anxiety went down to a 2 out of 10 or a 20 rather than a 90. So she's much more likely to get closer to sleep by doing the thought challenging exercise. So you don't need to go through all 9 of these questions. There's no magic in the 9 number. I've had some people really like 2 out of the 9 questions, and I tell them just stick with that. Just write them down in your phone. Again, use that mechanism when you're noticing some challenging or unhelpful thoughts. If you like all 9 of them, then by all means, go for it. You can get a gold star. Reframing negative thoughts, and this is more particular to sleep. So I just took that same graph and condensed it and made it as simple as possible. So this person is thinking, if I don't fall asleep soon, I'm not going to make it through tomorrow. I really want to be there for my kids. I'm really anxious. I'm so mad that I'm not sleeping, and I'm pretty amped up, like an 8 out of 10. And that person recognizes, like, hey, that's not very helpful. Those aren't the thoughts I want to be having. Let me think about it in a new way. What if I thought, even if I don't get great sleep, I can focus on resting right now, and I'll still be able to show up in whatever way possible for my kids and my family tomorrow. Now the person's feeling less anxious and they're a little bit more at peace. So for some group practice, this person is having the thought, I can tell this is going to be a bad night. Does anyone have any reframe or different way that this person can think about the bad night? It's going to be a peaceful night. Yeah, thanks. Perfect. I can go to my nest. Yeah, we're not sure what the night holds. I'm going to do what I can to be as calm and relaxed as possible. I'll focus on diaphragmatic breathing. I'll do my triangle breathing in my nest, have some tea. And once I start to feel sleepy again, I'll try again. Trying to have this bouncy, flexible mindset rather than a rigid black and white mindset. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, so shifting gears a lot. So there was cognitive behavioral therapy, which is this very kind of black and white directed therapy. And then we get into the concept of radical acceptance, which is basically that all of humans are in similar situations and we all know suffering, and we can either try and fight against suffering or we can accept it as it is. And that in and of itself will reduce some psychological tension. So again, we did a bit of a 180. But these are different tools that at different times could be helpful to you in what you're facing emotionally. So by choosing to radically accept the things that are out of our control, we are not saying that we like them. We are not saying that we want them. We are just recognizing that they are what they are, which is going to help us get unstuck from unhappiness, bitterness, anger, and sadness. And so here's a quote from a study they actually did on CBTI in a cancer patient population. And it's trying to shift our thinking. So we did a lot of controlling our thinking with the CBT. This, again, is a total 180, different tools. Trying to control your thoughts is like trying to reroute a powerful river. Instead, just try standing on the bank of the river. So we're not trying to control the thoughts anymore. We're just watching them float by. We're letting go of the effort to force these thoughts or for them to go in a certain direction. We'll practice a guided meditation here. I guess now is your warning if you've never done that or you're feeling worried about it. We'll get into some practice here today, where we'll tap into this idea of distancing ourselves from our thoughts and having a different relationship to them. This blends nicely into the concept of cognitive diffusion. So if reframing your negative thoughts isn't working, you tried the thought log, you tried best friend talk, another thing that we can do with our thoughts is to just create some distance from them and to just recognize that thoughts are a thing our brain has always done and will always do, and that doesn't mean that it's always right. So if I tell you right now not to think about a white bear, Everyone's got an image of a white bear in their mind, right? So we can recognize that sometimes our brain is a little overprogrammed and not always our friend. And so if we can just say, oh, there are my worries again, it's good to see you, welcome back. Sometimes that'll tone down the emotional intensity of what we're experiencing. Another, it sounds very silly and weird, but it does work. Another tip is to create characters for different things that you're concerned about. So I always go back to worried Wendy. She's tiny, she wears pigtails, she's worried about everything. She kind of is like chewing her fingernails at all times. Hey, Wendy, it's good to see you again. I can see you're worried, huh? Yeah, you're really stressed about this upcoming test we have or the images. And that'll, again, just create some distance and kind of tone down the intensity of what you're experiencing. We'll practice the leaves on a stream meditation, but that is imagining yourself in a peaceful place with a tree. There's leaves dropping, they float down the river, and we're going to put our thoughts and feelings and experiences on the leaves to give us some distance from what we're experiencing. Great thing to do before bed. And then you can also imagine that your fatigue or your sleepiness or your pain is something other than happening inside of you. So if you pulled it outside of your body, what would it look like? What color is it? How big is it? Can you make it smaller? Is it like effervescent? Is it a solid thing? And sometimes that can have a really big impact, and we've seen that intervention actually be really helpful for chronic pain and headaches in particular. All right, so mindfulness. Mine is twitching. Mindfulness is an open awareness to what we're experiencing. So very similar, again, to radical acceptance. We're just letting the present moment unfold. It's compassionate, it's non-judgmental, and it's willing. And so we're trying to decrease avoidance and decrease that sense that we're controlling our experiences and saying whatever is here. And that actually tends to make our distress lessen because they'll just naturally unfold in the moment. So practicing, we already did just a tiny bit of that when we practiced our triangle breathing and our diaphragmatic breathing, and then we'll get more into that with meditation. And certainly yoga is a good example. You could also have a meditative walking practice, and there's lots of other exercises. So here's a quote by kind of the more recent Western person who brought mindfulness meditation to us in the 2010s, Jon Kabat-Zinn, and that talks about practicing mindfulness by remembering as we can. We have considerable kindness towards ourselves, to be present in all our waking moments. And again, as we increase our tolerance to sit with distress and to accept things as they are, our discomfort actually lessens. So it kind of spins some of that on its head, some of our trying to control things. All right, so now we're going to get into a practice. I have the script on my phone. And it is just a couple minutes, like 3 to 5 minutes, but I really like this one and think it's worth our time to get together. All right, so I invite you to sit in a comfortable yet upright position in your chair. Ideally, your feet will be flat on the floor with your arms and legs uncrossed and your hands resting in your lap. Let your eyes gently close and take a couple deep breaths in and out. Notice the sound and the feel of your breath as you breathe in and out. Now I'd like you to imagine you're standing by the bank of a gently flowing stream and you're watching the water flow. Imagine feeling the ground beneath you, the sounds of the water flowing past, and the way the stream looks as you watch it. You start to notice that there are leaves that fall from the tree of all different shapes and sizes and colors that float down to the stream and float past you. Just continue to notice the leaves falling to the stream and floating by. As you're focused on that image, start to become aware of your thoughts, feelings, or sensations. Each time you notice a thought, feeling, or sensation, place it onto a leaf and let that leaf float down the stream. Do this regardless of whether the thought, feeling, or sensation are positive or negative, pleasurable or painful. Even if they're the most wonderful thoughts, place them on a leaf and let them float by. If your thoughts stop, just watch the stream. Sooner or later, they will start up again. Allow the stream to flow at its own rate. Notice any urges to speed up or slow down the stream, and put those on a leaf as well. Let the stream flow how it will. If you're having any thoughts or feelings about this exercise, place those on the leaves too. You might notice that a leaf gets stuck or won't go away. Just let it hang around. All you're doing is observing this experience. There's no need to force the leaf down the stream. Just continue to observe each experience and place it on a leaf. It's normal and natural to lose track of this exercise, and it tends to keep happening. When you notice you've lost track, just bring yourself back to watching the leaves on the stream. For the last time, notice the stream, place any thoughts, feelings, or sensations on the leaves, and watch them gently float down the stream. Allow the image of the stream to dissolve and slowly bring your attention back to where you're sitting in this room, how your body feels, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. All right, how was that? Yeah, at least it wasn't at the end, right before lunch, but there will be a break after me. Does anyone want to share a part of their experience or something they noticed?
I like to share something.
Yeah.
That was a great exercise. I really did it exactly as you said, Erin. And two things. One, I can see myself doing it again. And two, I felt like it kind of activated another part of my brain. And like ideas started to come and things like that. So it was actually very profound for me. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you the idea.
When I was going through a lot of anger issues in the beginning of finally figuring out what had gone on with me for years, there's a meditation online that's called Frick That. But it really helped me get in touch with being angry. And it's funny, too, when you do it, because you're like, it's exactly how I feel when I go through the day, you know? So sometimes it's not, I'm a Reiki master teacher, so it's not always lovely little meditation. Sometimes it's getting in touch with that negative side of yourself that's keeping you stuck. And if you can stick some humor on it, I found that meditation, you can look it up online, it's hysterical. It is. But it helped me get in touch with some anger issues that I was going on.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for sharing. That sounds fun. And I think a good point, kind of speaking to what Dr. Liu noticed, is when we practice meditation or general relaxation training, different parts of our brain can open up because they're not focused on all the things that we're always juggling or that always are in the forefront. And so really good thing to practice during the daytime when we're not stressed. So again, we can tap into it during those stressful experiences, and it'll be more useful to you if you do this before you go to bed at night.
So this seems to be something that would help me go to sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's kind of my routine of relaxing. This is sort of better though, because you can sort of let things go, and I like that.
Good.
Very, very helpful.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear. And sometimes people be like, well, what if I let it go and it's something that's really important I need to do tomorrow? Again, I think that's where you can use the worry time or say, I've got time tomorrow to address that. This thought will come back. I just don't need it right now. It's not helpful for me right now to have the thought about what I'm doing tomorrow or what needs to get done.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So self-compassion. This, again, is a newer field. Ben and I share a psychology fellow, and she actually was really passionate about this topic, and it hasn't been studied too much yet in the cancer population, but we're doing some research on that now. And so self-compassion, again, embraces the concept of mindfulness, being kind to ourselves, treating ourselves the way we treat others, and recognizing, again, that we not only all suffer, but that we all also make mistakes, and they're a normal part of being human. So this concept of best friend talk. So think about a time when someone that you love was stuck in a challenging situation. Maybe they had messed up or done something unhelpful, or they were in a really scary, unknown situation. And think about, or you can jot down, like what it is that you said to them in that time, or in response to what it was that they were facing. And then if we think about a time when we ourselves were in an uncertain situation, or we had taken a misstep, how do we typically respond to ourselves? We typically say, like, how could you do that? That was terrible. Maybe some catastrophic thoughts like, no one likes you, or this is really damaging. And we can see a difference in how we talk to ourselves versus how we talk to others. And so this is a really simple but powerful way for us to have better mental health, reduce distress, and just better overall outlook. I guess that's it. All right, so final section is responding versus reacting to stress. So stress, as Ben talked about with evolution, is really helpful for us. If we weren't stressed, or as he hypothesized, the people that never experienced stress are probably the ones that got eaten by the cheetahs on the savannah. So stress is a good thing. When we have that big response, fight, flight, or freeze, that's not mentioned here, but I myself am a freezer, and so when we get super activated and our heart is racing and something scary is happening, it's a good thing. Like, this is developed for good reasons. However, it is unlikely that we're doing this to immediately protect ourselves from a threat, most likely to something that we're thinking about in our head, like a worst-case scenario, and that tends to be less helpful. If we're constantly in this stress response, we're going to have sleep issues. We actually can study and look at people that are more often stressed have higher levels of pain, they're more likely to have anxiety, and they probably feel really overwhelmed. And so our stress response system is actually the sympathetic nervous system, and I like to think of it as a light switch where it's like on-off. And so when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, our relaxation response, or the parasympathetic nervous system, is off. And this is why we want to practice relaxation techniques and really build that muscle, so we have a stronger parasympathetic nervous system. And so when we practice mindfulness or deep breathing or the leaves on the stream, whatever works for you to reduce your stress, we're making that muscle stronger and can tap into it when we start to get stressed in the future. So that's the reactive state, is stress hits us and we're having a big response to it, rather than responding to stress is a little bit more intentional. One thing that works, this is kind of the synthesis of everything we've talked about today. So using those cognitive strategies, labeling the stressful experience, even just saying, I feel stressed, and bonus points if you say that out loud to someone else, as that tends to be even more effective. Again, shifting your attention to your breath, focusing on your breathing, even just a couple breaths is going to help reduce that sympathetic nervous system response of fight, flight, or freeze. And then we practice noticing your thoughts and feelings in the leaves on the stream exercise, so you can jump into doing some of that and just imagining almost floating above yourself and what is happening in your body. And then compassionately turn towards your stress, so using some of that best friend talk, saying something like, hey, this is really hard, or you're really worried about this, can go a long way towards moving to that response versus react mode with stress. So some examples, you're in the waiting room for one of your appointments, you feel your heart starting to pound, you don't know what they're going to talk about today, and just saying, my heart's pounding, I'm feeling pretty stressed. It's going to lower your distress. Shifting your attention for your breath, so again, you can do the diaphragmatic breathing, you can draw little triangles on your leg with your finger. It's going to help tone down our emotional response and move us more to that relaxed place. Noticing your thoughts and feelings, again with the leaves on the stream exercise, is something you can tap into. And then rather than thinking, something's wrong with me, why am I so stressed out about this, I can't stop thinking about it, moving to a place of, this is a big deal. It's okay to have these big thoughts. This is uncomfortable. And that's both acceptance as well as self-compassion. All right, so I do have some resources on the next slide, but sometimes I like to cement or kind of seal the deal by seeing if anyone wants to share any techniques that we learned today that might be useful in the future.
Why am I not offering this in the waiting room?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you guys sit around, you're freaking about your scan. Well, I mean, why don't I have, I'm not Erin, but why don't I have someone of Erin's pedigree, be doing this with you guys just constantly? I mean, how amazing would that be, right? That was my thought.
I love that. Yeah, and a lot of times our waiting rooms here will have TVs, and we just started marketing for psychosocial services on there, but we should probably add one with just the triangle breathing and just have that rotate through. Like you can just sit here and do this. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
I can say that I've been, thank you. My therapist actually taught me. Is that better? Okay. My therapist actually taught me, it was called boxed breathing, which is the exact same thing, just adding in an extra thing for holding your breath in between. And it absolutely helps me. I use it almost every night, and it really helps me settle down and fall asleep. So I highly, highly recommend it. And I don't just use it when I'm trying to fall asleep. I also use it when I'm in a stressful situation. And I close my eyes and also use the diaphragm breathing at the same time. So highly recommend the breathing.
Excellent. Quick follow-up question. How do you remember to use it? Because I feel like that's part of the struggle is, again, if you walk away with one thing today that you can use in the future, I would call that a success. Hopefully there's more, but it's so hard to get from this to what you're doing, which is actually doing it.
Honestly, it's been a long road and of therapy and having to hear it over and over again that what I need to do, and this is absolutely reinforcing it, that it's the best way to go. And coming to seminars like this is, I at the very beginning, I thought to myself when Ben was talking, this is the most educational thing I've been through since I was at CU Denver 20 years ago. 32 years ago, sorry, in college, in my psychology classes. This has been very educational. So, but really keeping up on this type of thing, going to seminars. I know a lot of people frown upon Googling, but I spend time on the internet, and I have researched a lot of these things that you are talking about before coming today, and that helped me as well.
Great. Thanks for sharing. And yeah, that's a perfect example to highlight. Between the three of us, there's going to be a whole set of tools, again, that you walk away with, and then your challenge becomes actually using them. And something that can work is setting a recurring alarm on your phone for the next week or two. That's just a reminder, like practice your breathing, do leaves on a stream. Because if you don't do that, you're going to forget and then feel like, things just never get better. I don't think that works for me.
Tell everyone a tip that a friend of mine gave me when my husband was diagnosed a long time ago in 2004. And he bought me a plant. And that plant sits on my front porch by the door. And when I come home at the end of the day or when I've been worrying, I walk over to the plant and I touch a leaf. And I leave all the worries there because we don't want them in our home. We don't want them in our safe space. And our home is our safe space and our bedroom where we sleep. So sometimes I'll even go out the front door and touch the leaf if I catch myself worrying about something that shouldn't be, in our safe place where we should be calming our nervous system. So if you're out and you see a little plant or something, put it by your front door and leave your troubles there. And in the morning, you can go pick them up. They'll be there the next day. So, and you'll notice that a lot of them have left, You know, you don't need to pick them all up. Some just needed to be let go. So
That's great. Thank you. I love that. It's very tactile. Again, it taps into some of these using your senses. There's a reminder, that cue, to keep engaging in that. All right. Well, thank you all for your participation. Here are some resources. If you need anything, feel free to reach out to us. And then references. So thanks so much.